the moment my mother said, "This is our daughter. She handles some cleaning work for us." I watched Raymond's mother set down her champagne glass very slowly, tilt her head, and look at me the way you'd look at someone you recognize but can't quite place. She didn't say anything, not yet. I smiled and reached for my water. My hand was completely steady. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to how we got to that rehearsal dinner table, because the cleaning comment wasn't even the worst thing my mother said that night. It wasn't even close. I grew up in a house where my younger sister, Jolene, was the future and I was the footnote. That's not me being dramatic, that was simply the operating logic of our family. Jolene was 2 years younger, prettier by everyone's accounting, easier to manage, and she'd gotten into a pre-med program at UNC that my parents talked about the way other families talked about winning the lottery. Every holiday, every dinner, every phone call with distant relatives ended the same way. "And Jolene is going to be a doctor, can you believe it?" Then someone would remember I existed and my mother would say something like, "Oh, and Aubrey is figuring things out." For most of my 20s, I let that narrative stand. Not because it was true, but because correcting it felt like more effort than it was worth. I'd left home at 19, moved to Charlotte, and built something quietly. I didn't broadcast it. I'd learned early that telling my family good news was like handing them a tool to pick apart. They'd find a way to minimize it, qualify it, or redirect the conversation back to Jolene within 60 seconds. So I kept my head down, I built, and I said very little about what I was building. The problem with that strategy is that silence gets filled, and my family filled it with whatever story was convenient. The cleaning thing started as a joke 3 years ago. My mother had come to visit my apartment in Charlotte. Nice place, good part of town, I'd furnished it carefully. And when her friend called mid-visit and asked what I was up to, my mother looked around my apartment, looked at me, and said, "She does some cleaning work. Keeps busy." I heard her through the kitchen doorway and I thought, that's strange, but I let it go. I thought it was a one-time thing, a stumble for words. It wasn't. Over the next 2 years, I started hearing it back from people. A cousin at Christmas, "Your mom mentioned you're in some kind of cleaning business?" A neighbor of my parents, "I hear you work for a cleaning company, that's honest work, good for you." An aunt at Easter lowering her voice like she was being kind. "There's no shame in it, you know. Not everyone has to go to college." I never corrected them. Part of me was curious how far my mother would take it. Part of me was saving something. I didn't know for what occasion exactly, but I kept it. Then Jolene got engaged. His name was Raymond Alcott, and his family was old Charlotte money. His father had built a commercial real estate firm over 40 years that now managed properties across 4 states. Raymond himself was an attorney at a firm downtown, nice enough man, genuinely seemed to love Jolene, which I respected. And his mother, Constance Alcott, was the kind of woman who ran the junior league, served on 2 nonprofit boards, and had a voice that could cut glass from 100 feet away. The engagement party was at my parents' house, and I drove down from Charlotte for it. I walked in the door, hugged Jolene, shook Raymond's hand, and within 4 minutes my mother had steered me toward Constance Alcott and said, with a smile so practiced it should have been patented, "Constance, this is our other daughter, Aubrey. She does cleaning work, house cleaning, mostly for some families in the area. She's always been more of a hands-on kind of girl." Constance looked at me. I looked back. "How lovely," Constance said, in a tone that was neither warm nor cold, just assessing. "It keeps me busy," I said, because I had decided years ago that I would not correct my mother in public. Not yet. What my mother did not know, what my entire family did not know, was that 3 years prior, I'd been brought in as a silent partner and operational consultant to a mid-size commercial cleaning and facilities management company called Summit Integrated Services. I'd helped restructure their contracts, digitize their client management, and expanded their portfolio from 11 accounts to 87. Summit now held service contracts with 4 hospital systems, 2 university campuses, and a portfolio of Class A office buildings across the Carolinas. Earlier that year, I'd been offered and accepted a full equity stake. I was on paper one of 3 owners of a company doing $14 million in annual revenue. So yes, technically, I was in cleaning. My mother had no idea. She thought she was being dismissive. She had accidentally told the truth. I kept that to myself through the entire engagement party. I ate my food, smiled, talked to Raymond's father about the Panthers, helped Jolene fix her earring back that kept falling out, and drove home to Charlotte that night without saying a word. But here is the part that changed everything. Here is the part that took it from a private joke I carried alone and turned it into something I could no longer stay quiet about. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I pulled my credit report. I did this quarterly habit I'd built years ago when I'd learned, the hard way, to track my own financial footprint carefully. The report came back with 3 accounts I didn't recognize, 2 credit cards and a personal loan totaling just under $22,000, all opened in the past 18 months. One of the addresses on file was my parents' house. I knew before I even started making calls. I spent 4 days documenting everything carefully before I called a number I had for a fraud investigator I'd worked with when Summit had a billing dispute 2 years earlier. She walked me through the process, confirmed what I'd found, and gently said, "You understand that if someone in your household opened these accounts using your information, that changes the nature of the conversation." I understood. I filed the report, I hired an attorney, and I did not call my parents. Because Jolene's wedding was in 6 weeks and I needed to think. Here is what I eventually decided. I was not going to blow up my sister's wedding. That was not who I wanted to be, and honestly, Raymond seemed like a decent man who didn't deserve his wedding day destroyed because of something my family had done. But I was also not going to walk into that reception and smile and let my mother introduce me to 100 people as the cleaning girl while she was actively committing fraud in my name. So I made a phone call to Constance Alcott. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure how that conversation was going to go. But it turned out Constance had been doing some research of her own since the engagement party. Apparently it was standard for her family to do quiet due diligence on anyone marrying into the Alcott name. Not invasive, just careful. And in the course of that process, Raymond's family's attorney had come across Summit Integrated Services, had traced the ownership structure, and had found my name. When I said, "Hello, Mrs. Alcott, this is Aubrey," she said before I could finish, "I've been hoping you'd call." We talked for 40 minutes. I told her everything. About the fraud, about the years of my family's story about me, about what I actually did for a living. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So," she said, "your mother has been telling people you clean houses, yes, and you do in fact manage a facilities company that holds a service contract with Presbyterian Medical Center, among others." Another pause. "Aubrey," she said, "I'd like you to sit at my table at the reception." I almost laughed. "Mrs. Alcott, Constance. And I mean it, I'd like you there. I think the seating arrangement as currently designed does not reflect the actual landscape of the room." She paused again. "I have a sense your family has been operating on a story that isn't accurate. I think the wedding might be an appropriate moment for that story to correct itself." We agreed we would let the evening unfold naturally. She would not do anything orchestrated or cruel. Neither would I. We simply agreed that if the truth came up, neither of us would run from it. The wedding was on a Saturday in late October, at a venue in Dilworth that Jolene had rented out entirely, a restored event space in an old brick building that must have cost more than I made my first 2 years out of high school combined. Flowers everywhere, string quartet, open bar with a craft cocktail menu. Jolene had planned it exquisitely. I'll give her that. I arrived alone, parked my own car and walked in. My father found me within 3 minutes. "Aubrey, good, you made it." Then scanning me, "You look nice." The pause before nice told me he'd expected less. "Thanks, Dad." He moved on. My mother spotted me from across the room, gave me a tight smile, and went back to talking to Jolene's mother-in-law, Constance, who caught my eye over my mother's shoulder and gave a single, measured nod. The ceremony was beautiful. Jolene cried. Raymond cried a little too, which made me like him more. I sat in the 3rd row and watched my sister get married and felt genuinely happy for her. Whatever was happening with our family, whatever my parents had done, Jolene was marrying someone who loved her. That part was real. The reception was where things shifted. The seating chart had me at a table near the back, table 11 near the exit, which I thought was a very specific kind of message. But when the doors opened for cocktail hour, Constance appeared at my elbow, quiet as a door closing, and said, "I've had your place card moved to table 2. I hope that's all right." Table 2 was the family table, immediate family, the Alcotts and 2 of Raymond's partners from the firm. "Constance," I started. "It's done," she said simply, and moved away before I could protest, so I sat at table 2. My mother came in and found her seat, also table 2, and looked across at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Something uncertain, something off script. "They moved you?" she said. "Apparently. The first hour was fine, dinner was served, toasts were made. Raymond's father gave a lovely speech. My mother gave a speech that mentioned Jolene 11 times and me 0, which I thought was actually impressive efficiency. I ate my salmon and drank my wine and talked to Raymond's law partner on my left about the commercial real estate market in Charlotte, which I knew more about than he expected. Then, during the gap between dinner and cake, when the table had loosened up, and people were on their third drinks, and conversations had gotten louder and less careful, one of Raymond's aunts, a woman named Gretchen who'd had the Cabernet, leaned across the table toward my mother and said, "So tell me about your girls. I know Jolene's the doctor. What does your other daughter do?" My mother smiled her practiced smile. "Oh, Aubrey is in cleaning services, house cleaning mostly. Commercial facilities management actually," Constance said from my mother's right without looking up from her dessert plate. Her voice was perfectly pleasant. "Aubrey is a partner at Summit Integrated Services. They hold the facilities contract for Presbyterian Medical Center, among others. About 14 million in annual revenue, if I remember correctly." The table went quiet the way rooms go quiet when a temperature changes, not all at once, but in a wave, one person at a time. Gretchen looked at me. Oh my goodness. My mother's hand holding her wine glass went very still. It's related to cleaning in a sense, my mother started. "It's a cleaning company," I said pleasantly. Mom's been accurately describing the industry. The scale is just a bit different than she may have made it sound. Raymond's law partner turned to me slowly. Summit Integrated? You're one of the partners at Summit?" "I am. We're actually in the middle of trying to land a facilities contract with a campus project we're developing off South Boulevard. We've been trying to get a meeting with Summit for 3 months. Send me your card," I said. "I'll make sure someone reaches out Monday." The conversation moved, the way dinner table conversations do, and on the surface everything looked normal. People laughed. Jolene and Raymond cut the cake, the DJ started setting up, but I watched my mother's face across that table for the next 20 minutes, and I saw something I had never once seen there in 30-some years. She looked small. Not because I had done anything cruel. I hadn't. I'd simply let the truth occupy the space it had always deserved, and watched what happened when the story she'd been telling couldn't hold. My father leaned over to me around 9 o'clock, when the dancing had started, and most of the table had scattered. "You should have told us," he said quietly. I looked at him for a moment. "I did tell you, Dad. 7 years ago, when I moved to Charlotte, I told you I was going into business consulting and facilities management. You told me I should think about something more stable." He didn't have a response to that. Later, I found my mother standing alone near the cocktail station holding a club soda watching Jolene dance. "Aubrey," she said when I stopped beside her. "Mom." She was quiet for a long moment. On the dance floor, Jolene and Raymond were doing some improvised, laughing version of a slow dance that had nothing to do with the beat of the song. Jolene looked happy. She was happy. That part was good. "I didn't know," my mother finally said. "I did tell you," I said. "A few times, actually. You just had a different story that worked better, so you kept using it." She flinched, which was as close to accountability as I expected to get that evening. "The fraud, Mom," I said quietly, because we were in public and Jolene was 20 feet away and this was her wedding day. "We'll deal with the financial stuff next week. Maya rent reach out to yours." She turned to look at me. Tonight is Jolene's wedding. "We're not going to do this tonight." She nodded. Something moved across her face, relief, maybe, or the early shape of shame. It was hard to tell the difference. I went back to the dance floor and I danced with Jolene for one song. She didn't know anything that had happened at that table. To her, it was just her wedding, and her sister had come, and they were dancing. She laughed and stepped on my foot and apologized, and I told her she looked beautiful and she said, "You know I love you even when Mom does that stuff, right?" She'd seen more than I'd given her credit for. "I know," I said. "Dance with your husband." I left at 11:30. Said goodbye to Constance at the door, who pressed my hand and said, "I hope you'll come to Christmas. I have a feeling you and I will get along very well." I drove back to Charlotte alone up 277, the city opening up in front of me the way it always did at night, lit up and wide and full of things that were still becoming. I had a 7 a.m. call with Summit's operations team on Monday, a contract negotiation on Wednesday, and a meeting with my attorney about my parents scheduled for Thursday. Life did not stop for Revelation. It just moved forward differently. My mother called the following Tuesday, not to apologize exactly, but in the way people call when they're circling an apology and haven't quite committed to landing. She talked around it for several minutes. I listened. I think I told a story about you, she finally said. That wasn't fair. You told a lot of people a story that wasn't fair, I said. For a long time. She was quiet. I need you to understand that the financial matter is separate, I said. Whatever happens between us personally, that piece moves forward regardless. My attorney is handling it and I'm not negotiating it down. I understand, she said, and she sounded like she did. We didn't make promises, we didn't do a reconciliation scene. I told her I'd be in touch, and I meant it. And I meant it in the complicated way you mean things with people you love who have also genuinely hurt you. That's a kind of truth that doesn't have a clean ending. But here is what I know. The story my mother told about me for almost 4 years, in rooms I was in and rooms I wasn't. It shaped how my family's entire social world understood who I was. And then one Saturday evening in October, at table 2 of my sister's wedding, a woman named Constance Alcott said 14 words that corrected the entire record. I did not blow up a wedding. I did not humiliate my mother publicly, even though she had done exactly that to me more times than I could count. I let the truth into the room, and I let it do what it does when you stop keeping it out. Jolene texted me the morning after her honeymoon. She said, "Raymond's mom loves you. Like, a lot. She asked if you'd want to be on one of her nonprofit boards." I stared at my phone for a minute and then I typed back, "Tell her I'll think about it." I put my phone down and poured my coffee, and outside my window Charlotte was doing what it always did on October mornings, cool and sharp and going somewhere. The kind of city that doesn't care what story you walked in with. It only cares what you build. I had built plenty, and I was just getting started.